Hello, movie patient, and welcome to Film Therapy. I am Brienne, also known as Miss Movies, also known as your film therapist. I'm not a real therapist, but I play one on the internet just for this show. And as with every session of film therapy, I always have a guest patient, and that guest patient today is Clarke Wolfe. Welcome to the
Hello!
show, Clarke.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this idea. I'm very excited to be a part of it.
I'm excited that you are a part of it as well. And for those of you that have never seen this show, here's how it works. I'm going to ask Clarke three questions. They're the same three questions that I ask each film therapy guest. The first one is, what is a film that inspires you? The second is, what is a film that, or a scene from a film that triggers a memory for you? Perhaps it's painful, maybe it's happy. And the third one is, what is a film that helps you through difficult times? So I started this show because I do suffer from depression and find that movies are a way to cope with that. And I know that other people probably do that too. So I thought, hey, let's all talk about it together. Yay.
I,
Always
I
fun.
think that's great. I think it's really important. I also suffer from depression. It's something that I work on all day, every day, all the time, that I think people don't really understand, that sometimes we don't even really understand what's
Right.
happening. And so I think talking about that out loud is really important. But movies have always been, and entertainment have always been a way, I think, to cope and to process and relate and kind of identify. And so, yeah, I love that you do this.
Thanks. I love that we just get to talk about some interesting topics that have to do with film. I think it's an interesting way to like utilize film in a different way.
Absolutely.
Before we get into our questioning, though, I do want those that are watching, the people that are in the waiting room, which I had open. Oh, there it is. It's open now. Um, the people that are in the waiting room to know a little bit more about you. I'm sure that they already know, but just in case they don't, let us know who you are, what you're all about.
Sure. So, my name is Clarke Wolfe, and I am an actress and a host and a producer. And right now, I am co-starring and producing a stage musical, which I'm so excited about. It's called Slashed the Musical, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a slasher summer camp horror comedy musical that has premiered or had its first preview at Hollywood Fringe here in Los Angeles on Sunday. And our official opening night is this Friday, and I'm very excited about it. And in addition to that, you've probably seen me on Nerdist and Collider and Skybound and a handful of other places on the internet.
I don't know what Skybound is. Can you tell us what Skybound is?
Yeah, Skybound is Robert Kirkman's company. Robert Kirkman is the creator of The Walking Dead and Outcast. And so this is Skybound is his company where I do a podcast weekly for the show and comic book Outcast, which I love doing. And then I have done a handful of other fun things with them as well. So I've been working with them on and off for, I'd say, about a year and a half now. And they're amazingly creative and wonderful people. So definitely go follow Skybound on all of their social media channels.
Definitely. I'm excited to check something new out. So thank you for
Oh,
that.
yeah, of course.
I also want to know about your musical that you've produced, and I want to know how long is that going to run for, and where can you buy
Yeah,
tickets, all that good stuff
yeah.
in case you're in LA.
We're so excited about it. So we will run until, I want to say, shame on me, I don't even know off the top of my head, June 23rd, which is, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay, so we close on June 23rd at midnight, and we have 8 shows in between now and closing night. Um, the good news is that we are almost sold out, which is unbelievable. So it's good news and bad news. Right now, I think we only have 15 tickets left for the entire run.
Oh,
So if you guys want to come, better snatch them up real fast. But if for some reason you don't live in the Southern California area and you want to hear the music, we actually recorded a cast album that is free to download on Bandcamp. So you can hear all of our groovy 80s jams about slasher killers and all such things. And so you can go to facebook.com/slashed the musical, and you'll find all the information there. And we're ridiculously proud of this show, and I'm insanely proud of it, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. behind the scenes and on the stage. It's been so nice to get back into that part of my life, which I miss a lot. So it's really fun. And the show is freaking great. It's super good. So I'm really proud of it.
When you say that part of your life, I'm assuming that you mean being on stage in front of a
Yes.
live audience. Okay.
Yes, I do. I do. And, I mentioned it earlier this year, but I had surgery on my vocal cords earlier this year. And part of the reason why I did that is because I have been a singer my whole life, and I was noticing that there was something wrong with my voice. And sure enough, I found out that there were polyps growing on my vocal cords, and we need to have surgery to take them away, and then 3 weeks of vocal rest, and all of these things. And so I didn't do that for nothing. Obviously talking is part of my job, but the other parts of it are really important too. And so it's kind of scary to be back on stage, not being back on stage, but just after having the surgery, still getting used to how my voice is working and still getting used to the control of my voice. So that's been a little scary because I do sing in the show, but it's been really fun too.
Nice. Well, let's get into our first question,
Okay.
which is, what is a film that inspires you?
Yeah, I have a couple. It's interesting because I don't know if you feel this way, but as a fan of film, I often find that I'm being inspired by new things all the time. And I think that that's really important. It's like really important to remind yourself why you do what you do and why you love what you love. And so more recently, like I've been inspired by, just last weekend, I was insanely inspired by Wonder Woman. Which I was not expecting. I had no hopes or expectations for Wonder Woman whatsoever.
Right.
But I was floored. It was an incredibly emotional experience, but it was also inspiring. It was inspiring personally, but it was also inspiring professionally. It's always inspiring, I think, to see art or pop entertainment that moves you, and I was incredibly moved. So I see inspiration there. I see inspiration in the horror world. Like I was very much inspired by The Babadook and The Witch, which are like smaller, compelling horror stories about women that I think are really, really great, especially on second and third viewing, when you start to really pull out of there like the little sneaky details. But the one that's like I guess the one that I would use to answer this question definitively is Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. So this is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's definitely in my top 10. And the reason it inspires me is because in addition to being a really great movie, this was Chaplin's first talkie. It was the Tramps' first time talking. But it was an insanely risky movie for Charlie Chaplin to make. Charlie Chaplin was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He was a global movie star. And at a time when people, especially in entertainment, were not speaking out against Hitler and not speaking out against the Holocaust, he did. And he spoke truth to power, and he, was indirectly deported from America as a result. And to me, that's so, and it inspires. So that's like the tactical thing that inspires me. But the artistic thing that inspires me is that it's funny, it's romantic, it makes a point. To me, it is like satire at its best. And it's exactly what satire can be and needs to be. And it's emotional. It's so emotional for me to watch. So The Great Dictator, even almost 100 years later, inspires me to this day.
I love it. I'm gonna have to put that on my list. You definitely bring me new films and old films to watch, because I watched The Apartment. You were on 6 Degrees, and
Oh,
you told me you liked The Apartment, and I was like, oh, I should see that movie. So I did finally see it.
what
And I
did you
love
think
Shirley
about it?
MacLaine. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I really
Isn't it
enjoyed
kind
it.
isn't it kind of amazing how like modern it is? Aside from like
Exactly.
the financial parts where they're like, oh, my apartment is only $100 a month, and you're like, yeah, okay. But just like it's such. This is the thing I love about Billy Wilder, and I think we talked about it on 6 Degrees. But like Billy Wilder has such a dark sensibility, and yet it's such a cultural sensibility to be able to laugh at darkness, and laugh with darkness. Speaking of depression and therapy, I mean, like, and not laughing at it as in like a coping mechanism, as in like this is part of processing human darkness. Is if you can, like, Billy Wilder was a Holocaust survivor himself, and so it's like if you can create comedy in the aftermath of such horror, like that's, yeah, I love that movie.
It was a good one. I'm glad that I watched it. So
I'm
thank
glad
you
you
for
liked
that. So
it.
now I'm going to watch The Great Dictator.
Yeah,
Be on my ever growing list of the movies I missed, which
we
is
all have them.
we do. We do. Sometimes I'm just a little more like forefront with it where I'm like, yeah, didn't see it. Didn't see
No,
it.
look, I will. I don't care if I live to be 100. I will die with hundreds of movies in my Netflix queue. Like it will never. There, I will never see all the movies, and
Right.
and I think you only see all the movies when you're Quentin Tarantino and you can afford to see all the movies because you can
Yeah.
afford to sit down and watch all of the movies. And unfortunately, I don't have that kind of time. I wish I
Right.
did, but
Right. Let's get into our second question, which is what is a film or a scene from a film that triggers a memory for you? Perhaps it's painful or maybe it's happy.
yeah. So like this was an interesting question because I really thought about it, and it was hard for me to come up with like a memory in particular. But I can talk about a movie that triggers still a real emotional reaction in me.
Okay.
And I think the memory of like the evolution of this is really interesting to me. And it's Rosemary's Baby. And I've talked about this before, but like to me, the first time, so we were just talking about it. You have these movies on your list that you have to see, right? And for me, I remember being in school and that Rosemary's Baby is always on every horror list, and so it's like, okay, well, gotta watch that. And I finally did when I was in college, and I remember being like, okay, I mean, like this is whatever. But what's been amazing for me is as I have grown up and as I have become a more of an adult woman, this movie has changed for me.
Hmm.
Which is why when people like say, "Oh, I saw this movie and I hated it. It was so dumb. I don't understand like what the point is." It's like, well, if people are saying that this is amazing and that's kind of the consensus, not to say you can't have your own opinion, but maybe there's something to it that perhaps is worth revisiting or reimagining or re-examining. And so the second time I saw Rosemary's Baby, I was in my mid 20s and I kind of was like, oh, okay, I'm reacting to this in a very different way. And then now when I watch that movie, it brings me to tears at the end every time because I think it's the realization and identifying with like what has happened, the idea that somebody has sold you out, the idea that somebody you trust like bartered your body for their gain, the fact that you're now left with a choice of like, what am I supposed to do? I now have the one thing I've wanted my whole life, and it's tainted and it's scary. So what do I do? It's so messed up and so upsetting to me, that it's really, yeah, it's really evolved for me as I've gotten older. But it's painful. It's not, I guess, painful memories, but it's painful thoughts, and it's painful, like, your deepest, darkest fears, essentially, which I'm sure come from painful memories that I've suppressed and I can't think of right now. But
I think it's interesting what you talk about in terms of like how a movie changes as you get
mhm,
older. And I definitely agree. I've always felt like John Hughes movies are like the wine of films because like you
mhm,
see them when you're young and then they mean something and you identify with a character, but then when you go back and watch it when you're older, you identify with a different character and you're like, I see
mhm,
how I'm growing up in this with this movie and how it changes and how I look at it differently. And I find that to be really really interesting. And I don't know if at the time they thought, oh yeah, this is for all audiences and here's why, because this person's going to identify here and this person's going to identify here. And I don't think they necessarily think about that the person that identifies with one character eventually identifying with another character. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I find
It's
that
very,
so fascinating. Uh,
yeah, because it's human. I mean, look, if you're the same person that you were when you're 15 to when you're 25 to when you're 35 to when you're 45, then you're not growing. I mean, like people, you're always who you are, of course, that you're your core. But like, of course, I would hope that people would evolve as they go through their life and maybe
right.
see things or identify with different people. Maybe you haven't met the person yet that's going to help you identify or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the beauty of art is that as you change, the art changes, even though the intention it's finite, even though the art is there and the art hasn't changed, you have. And I think that that's what's really kind of amazing about um, our connection to art.
Right. Absolutely. Um, there was one other example I was going to give. Oh yeah, the same thing happened with me, like with Goonies or with
Mm-hmm.
Gremlins. I was like, I didn't see those as a kid, so seeing them as an adult, I'm like, I don't understand the nostalgia behind it, but I'm like, I'm never going to understand that, which
Mm-hmm.
makes me sad. That doesn't mean that I don't think they're worth revisiting, um, because they're obviously very cultural phenomenon films.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I missed it, and I'm sad that I missed out on the first seeing it when I was at the proper age to be exposed to it.
Sure. I'm like that with Gremlins myself. I went back. I never grew up on Gremlins, and I went back and watched it, and I was kind of like, but that's the other thing. It's kind of just like, well, yeah, but that's okay. It's okay to not have a personal. You're not going to have a personal connection to every movie ever, or every book, or every whatever, even if it is a pop culture phenomenon. But I think as people who love film, it's always fun and interesting to think about why those movies resonated and what made them cultural touchstones. Like that to me is endlessly
Mhm.
fascinating, even if you don't personally connect to it.
Right, absolutely. Let's get into our third question, which is, what is a film that helps you through difficult times?
Well, so this one, I mean, I have a list like 15 movies long. I mean, it's funny because there's some things that are like silly movies that always make me laugh. Whether it's we talked about on 6 Degrees, A Fish Called Wanda, which I love, which makes me laugh like like nothing else. Uh, even the Andy Samberg movie Hot Rod makes me laugh.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I love that movie. Saving Silverman makes me laugh, like stupid laughs. But then there are movies that are comfort food to me, that are movies that I grew up on, like Miss Congeniality always makes me happy. Steel Magnolias, like if I need to like really cry, I watch Steel Magnolias, or I watch When Harry Met Sally, which is a movie that just by the end of it, I am a sobbing mess. And then there are movies that I'm still rediscovering, like so The Princess Bride is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. It's incredibly personal to me because it's something my dad and I watched. My dad gave me the book when I was very young. The book is my favorite book I've ever read. Um, but since I've loved that movie since I was little, again, talking about like evolution, there were different scenes that resonated with me at different times in my life. And it wasn't, and I can say this like wholeheartedly, it wasn't until about 6 months ago when I saw The Princess Bride at the Egyptian here in Hollywood, from start to finish with a sold out audience on a big screen, where I truly understood that it was a perfect movie. Like people will tell you that all the time, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I've seen it hundreds of times. Not an exaggeration. I could close my eyes and play that movie back in my head verbatim, right? But seeing it in this way, actually on a big screen for the first time with an audience, it really made me realize how truly special that movie actually is. Apart from nostalgia, like I looked at it as a film and was like, no, he did everything. Like Rob Reiner did everything right, and it's kind of amazing how much he did everything right with this movie. So that one always makes me feel good. And Labyrinth, of course, because as you know, I love that movie.
Yes. For that screening, was there anything special about the screening, or it was just we're gonna play this movie?
Well, Carrie Elwes was speaking, to promote his book about the Princess Bride, but he spoke after. Um, and actually, the reason I got tickets to it was because I had a Fandango gift card that was going to be expiring, or like, I had like two tickets, for free, but expires on this day, and it was. December, the screening was like December 10th or something like that, or December 15th. And so I was like, okay, well, might as well. Like, why not? This would be fun. But he didn't speak before the movie. He spoke after it.
Mhm. But that sounds pretty cool to see
Oh,
him
it was
talk.
it was great. He's a raconteur. He's a very affable guy, and he's got stories for days. So it was really fun.
Well, thank you so much, Clark, for coming on to this session of film therapy. Where can everyone find you?
Oh yeah, so you guys can find me at Clarke Wolfe, Clarke with an E, Wolf with an E, on pretty much all of the interwebs. And if you're interested in more about my musical Slashed, you can go to facebook.com/slashed the musical.
And if you can't make it to the show because they only have a few more tickets, you can go on Bandcamp and find
Yeah,
their album, and you can listen to their sweet jams
it's
for
true. You
the
can
show.
download it for free. And you can, like I would say, if you are interested in it and you can't get tickets to our run here at the Hollywood Fringe Festival, you may want to like the page and follow the Facebook page, because maybe there will be a tour at some point,
Oh.
or maybe we will have an extended run at some point. So you just might want to like keep up with it, is what I
Okay.
would say.
That's what I figured. If the tickets are pretty much sold out, it's like, oh, maybe they'll extend it. Who knows? Who
Who
knows?
knows?
Well, very exciting. I'm very excited for your opening night and
Thank you.
break a leg on that.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. If you are interested to find out what I do, you can find me all day, every day on Twitter at Miss Movies, or you can check out my website, missmovies.net. Couldn't get the com. So sorry, everyone.
So
Um,
close.
thank you all for joining us. We will see you next time. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.